Ava stood on the sidewalk outside the glittering ballroom, stomach empty, eyes fixed on the grand piano inside like it was the only thing keeping her alive. With a trembling voice, she asked if she could play for food, but the guests in tuxedos and gowns only laughed, mocking the dirt on her hands and the rags on her back. They didn't know that behind the hunger and the shame was a gift no conservatory could buy. Ava had spent every night of her young life turning scraps of sound into music, disciplining herself with the same hunger that now drove her to beg. And while the wealthy crowd thought they were watching a joke, they were about to discover they had dismissed a prodigy whose music would silence them all. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The November wind cut through downtown like a knife, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust fumes. Outside the Whitmore Grand Hotel, 12-year-old Ava pressed herself against the brick wall, watching through the massive windows as hundreds of guests in evening gowns and tuxedos laughed over champagne. Her stomach twisted with hunger as she watched servers weave between tables loaded with food that would probably end up in the trash. She pulled her threadbare jacket tighter, the holes in the elbows offering little protection against the cold. Her fingers, stiff from the chill, unconsciously moved in patterns only she could understand, phantom keys of a piano that existed only in her memory. The service door burst open, and a server hurried out with a garbage bag. Ava waited until he went back inside before approaching the dumpster. She'd learned to time it right. Too early and the food was still too hot to handle. Too late and the rats got there first. Tonight, she found half a dinner roll wrapped in a napkin, barely touched. She ate it slowly, making it last. Through the windows, she could see it. A grand piano, black and gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. It sat on a small platform, untouched, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. The main entrance doors opened, releasing a wave of warm air and laughter. A group of guests stepped out for fresh air, their jewelry catching the streetlights. Ava knew she shouldn't, but desperation made her brave. Or maybe stupid. "Excuse me," she said, stepping into the light. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The group turned. A woman in pearls actually gasped, stepping back like Ava might be contagious. "Please," Ava continued, her hands trembling. "I can play piano. If I could just play one song, maybe you could spare some food." The silence lasted 2 seconds before it shattered into laughter. "Oh my God," one man wheezed, loosening his bow tie. "She thinks this is some kind of street performance venue." "Look at her," the woman in pearls said, not even trying to lower her voice. "She probably doesn't even know what a piano is." "Someone should call security before she tries to sneak in," another suggested. Ava's cheeks burned, but she stood her ground. "I really can play. My mother taught me." "Your mother?" A younger man, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and a gold watch, stepped forward. "And where is she?" "Let me guess. She's around the corner with the rest of your family, running some kind of scam?" "She's dead." The words came out flat, matter of fact. She'd said them enough times that they'd lost their sharp edges. The laughter faltered for a moment, then picked up again, more uncomfortable but still cruel. "Well, that's convenient for the sob story," the man with the gold watch said. The doors opened again, and Charles Whitmore himself emerged. Ava recognized him from the bronze plaque in the lobby. Silver hair, perfectly styled, dark suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that assessed everything like he was calculating its worth. "What's the commotion?" His voice had the kind of authority that made everyone else quiet down immediately. "This child thinks she can play piano for food," the woman in pearls explained, clearly expecting him to share their amusement. Charles looked at Ava, his gaze traveling from her matted hair to her dirty sneakers with holes where her toes pressed through. His lip curled slightly. "You want to play my piano?" He said it like the idea itself was offensive. "That's a Steinway Model D. It costs more than most houses." "I won't hurt it," Ava said quietly. "I know how to be careful." Charles laughed, not the harsh bark of the others, but something colder. "Security?" 2 guards appeared immediately. "Please," Ava said, taking a step toward the door. "Just one song. I haven't played in months, and She never finished the sentence. As the guards moved toward her, she darted sideways, not trying to escape, but moving toward the open door. She made it 3 steps inside before they caught her arms, but it was enough to see the piano up close, enough to reach out one hand and brush the keys. The notes that emerged stopped everyone cold. It was just a fragment, maybe 5 seconds of melody, but it was pure and haunting, a minor progression that seemed to hold all the sadness of a hungry child who'd lost everything. Her fingers found the keys like they were coming home, and for those brief seconds, the lobby fell completely silent. Then the guards yanked her back, and the spell broke. How did she? Someone started to ask. Lucky accident, Charles said loudly, though something flickered in his eyes. A child banging on keys. Get her out of here. The guards dragged Ava toward the door, but she caught one last glimpse of the piano, her fingers still tingling from the touch of the keys. Wait. A young woman in a server's uniform stepped forward. Elena, her name tag read. She had warm brown eyes and calloused hands that suggested she knew what real work felt like. She's just hungry. There's no need to. Elena. Charles's voice carried a warning. Don't you have tables to attend to? Elena's jaw tightened, but she stepped back. Still, her eyes found Ava's, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of a fellow survivor. As the guard deposited Ava on the sidewalk, the crowd's laughter resumed, louder than before, as if they needed to drown out what they'd just heard. Street kids, someone muttered. They think they can just take advantage. Someone should teach her that real talent takes years of proper training, another added. Not whatever nonsense her mother showed her in some shelter. Ava walked away, her cheeks burning and her stomach still empty. But as she turned the corner, she spotted something taped to a lamppost, a crumpled flyer for the National Youth Music Competition. Full scholarship to the winner. Training with real teachers. A chance at a real life. She carefully peeled it off, smoothing the wrinkles as best she could. 3 blocks away, in the alley she called home, she sat on her makeshift bed of cardboard and newspapers and studied every word by the light filtering through from the street. She closed her eyes, and she was 5 years old again, sitting beside her mother in the basement of St. Mark's Church. The piano there was old and out of tune, but her mother's hands made it sing. Music isn't just notes, baby, her mother had said, guiding Ava's small fingers. It's telling the truth when words aren't enough. Her mother had been sick for so long. Ava had almost forgotten what she looked like healthy. The medicine cost too much, the apartment cost too much, everything cost too much. They sold everything. The TV, the microwave, and finally the small keyboard her mother had saved 3 years to buy. 2 weeks after they sold it, her mother died in the emergency room, holding Ava's hand and humming a lullaby only they knew. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of group homes Ava ran from, shelters that were too dangerous, and finally the streets, which were terrible, but at least honest about it. She looked at the flyer again. The competition was in 3 months. She had no piano to practice on, no proper clothes, no entry fee. But she had the music in her head, countless compositions she'd created during sleepless nights, rhythms tapped out on dumpster lids and melodies hummed into the darkness. Back at the hotel, the party continued. Charles had returned to his role as host, charming donors and accepting praise for his patronage of the arts. But something nagged at him. The clarity of those 5 notes, the way they'd seemed to silence even the clink of champagne glasses. Probably had lessons before, Gregory Phillips said, appearing at his elbow. Gregory was 22, Charles's protege, groomed since age 7 to be the perfect pianist. You know how it is. These people have one skill and think it makes them special. Of course, Charles agreed, but his eyes drifted to the piano. Near the kitchen, Elena loaded dishes, her mind elsewhere. She'd seen something in that girl's eyes she recognized. The look of someone who'd had everything taken except the one thing they refused to let go of. During her break, she stepped outside, hoping maybe to find the girl, to give her the sandwich she'd hidden in her apron. But the streets were empty except for the usual late-night traffic. In the alley, Ava whispered to herself, her breath visible in the cold air. They'll hear me play again. And next time they won't laugh. She didn't know that Elena had pocketed the security footage USB from the desk when no one was looking, or that tomorrow she'd watch those 5 seconds of piano playing over and over, recognizing something extraordinary. She didn't know that her life was about to change. All she knew was that she had music inside her that demanded to be heard, and she'd rather die than let it stay silent. The next evening, Elena waited outside the hotel staff entrance. The sandwich from yesterday replaced with a fresh one, plus an apple and a bottle of water. She'd barely slept, those 5 seconds of piano playing running through her mind on repeat. She'd studied music once before life got in the way, and she knew the difference between lucky accident and raw talent. Ava appeared around the corner just after sunset, stopping when she saw Elena. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ava said quickly, ready to run. "I know." Elena held out the food. "I'm here to help." Ava approached cautiously, the way stray cats do when they're not sure if kindness is real or a trap. She took the sandwich but didn't eat it immediately, studying Elena's face. "Why?" Elena sat on the steps, patting the spot beside her. "Because I've been where you are." "Maybe not exactly, but close enough." Ava sat, maintaining enough distance to bolt if needed. "You were homeless?" "Close to it. After my dad died, my mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I got into Berkeley on scholarship, but even with financial aid, we couldn't swing the living expenses." Elena's voice carried old pain worn smooth by time. "I lasted 1 semester before I had to drop out. Now I serve champagne to people who spend more on a bottle than I make in a month." They sat in silence while Ava ate, slowly, savoring each bite. "Those 5 seconds you played," Elena said finally. "That wasn't luck." Ava's shoulders tensed. Everyone was scared. "There's a difference." Elena pulled out her phone, showing Ava the security footage she'd saved. "I've watched this 20 times. The way your hand positioned, the fingering you used, someone taught you properly." "My mother." Ava's voice went soft. "She studied at Juilliard for 2 years before she had to drop out. She got pregnant with me." Elena was quiet for a moment, understanding, filling in the gaps. "She taught you everything she knew, everything she could. We didn't always have a piano, but she'd draw keyboards on cardboard, and we'd practice fingering. She'd hum the notes so I could hear them." Ava's fingers moved unconsciously, playing an invisible keyboard on her knees. She said muscle memory was just as important as having an instrument. She was right. Elena stood suddenly. "Come with me." "Where?" "Trust me." Against her better judgment, Ava followed. Elena led her back to the hotel, but to a different entrance, a service door that required a key code. "The ballroom's empty tonight," Elena explained, punching in numbers. "There's a corporate event tomorrow, but right now, it's just us and the piano." Ava's heart jumped. "Won't you get in trouble?" "Probably." Elena smiled. "But some things are worth the risk." The ballroom was different in the darkness, lit only by emergency exits and the city lights through tall windows. The piano sat in shadow, but Ava could feel its presence like gravity. She approached slowly, reverently, running her fingers along the closed lid. "Go ahead," Elena whispered. Ava lifted the lid, and the smell of wood polish and felt made her dizzy with memory. She sat on the bench, adjusting its height, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she just breathed, feeling the cool ivory under her fingertips. Then she began to play. It started soft, tentative, scales to warm up, fingers stiff from the cold. Then arpeggios flowing like water. Finally, a piece her mother had written, one only the two of them had ever heard. The melody lifted into the darkness, filling the empty ballroom with longing and love and loss so profound that Elena had to sit down. Ava played for 10 minutes, 15, losing herself in the music. She didn't hear the door open, didn't notice the figures standing in the shadows until the lights blazed on. "What the hell is this?" Charles Whitmore stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. Elena jumped up, but Ava's hands froze on the keys, a chord hanging unresolved in the air. "Mr. Whitmore, I can explain," Elena started. "You brought that street child in my hotel to touch my piano." He stalked forward, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble. "You're fired. Get out. Both of you." "Wait." Ava stood, facing him. It's not her fault. I begged her. Charles laughed, that same cold sound from before. Oh, please. Elena's always been too soft. I should have. I'll play for you. The words tumbled out before Ava could stop them. Any piece you want. If I can't do it, I'll leave and never come back. But if I can, she swallowed. You let me into your competition. The youth won from the flyer. Charles's eyes narrowed. You think you can bargain with me? I think you're curious, Ava said, finding courage she didn't know she had. Otherwise, you would have called security already. The silence stretched between them. Elena held her breath. Fine, Charles said finally. Chopin. Etude Op. 10, number 4. You have one chance. Elena's stomach dropped. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire, requiring incredible speed and precision. Even professional pianists struggled with it. Ava sat back down, closing her eyes. She could hear her mother's voice. When you don't know a piece, baby, feel it first. The notes will follow. She placed her hands on the keys and began. It wasn't perfect. She stumbled twice in the first measure, but then something clicked. Her fingers flew across the keys, the notorious running passages flowing like water. She didn't have the sheet music, was playing from a memory of hearing her mother practice it years ago, but the essence was there, the storm and stress of it, the relentless forward motion. When she finished, the last notes ringing in the air, Charles's face had changed. The sneer was gone, replaced by something harder to read. Where did you learn that? My mother played it. I listened. You learned that complex piece by ear. Ava nodded. Charles walked to the piano, running one finger along its edge. It was sloppy. Your technique needs work. The middle section was rushed. Ava's heart sank, but he paused, clearly struggling with something. You have something. Raw, unpolished, but something. Elena stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, if you could just... The youth competition has an entry fee, he said, ignoring her. $500. Plus, you need proper attire, sheet music, training. He looked at Ava with calculating eyes. I'll make you a deal. You can enter, and I'll waive the fee. But you compete against my student, Gregory. If he places higher than you, you never come near this hotel again. If by some miracle you beat him, you can practice here twice a week until the competition. That's not fair, Elena protested. Gregory's had years of training. Life isn't fair, Charles snapped. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Ava stood. I'll take it. Charles smiled, and it wasn't kind. Excellent. The preliminary round is in 6 weeks. Elena, since you seem so invested, you can supervise her practice sessions. Tuesdays and Thursdays after midnight when the ballroom's empty. If anything goes missing, if there's any damage, you're both banned for life. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ava, that piece you played when I walked in, the one your mother wrote? Forget it. Judges want to hear real music, not sentimental garbage. After he left, Elena and Ava stood in the ringing silence. Why did he agree? Ava asked. Elena watched the door Charles had exited through. Because he thinks you'll fail. He wants to humiliate you publicly, prove that talent alone isn't enough without proper breeding and training. She turned to Ava. But he's wrong. We're going to prove him wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, they developed a routine. Elena would sneak Ava in after her shift ended, and they'd practice until 3 or 4 in the morning. Elena couldn't teach technique, but she could listen, could point out when something sounded off. She brought books from the library, music theory, biographies of famous pianists, anything that might help. Ava absorbed it all like a sponge. She'd practice fingering on any flat surface during the day, humming the pieces under her breath. She started composing her own music, writing it down on napkins and scraps of paper Elena brought her. You need to eat more, Elena said one night, watching Ava's thin shoulders work as she played. And sleep. You can't perform if you collapse. I'm fine, Ava insisted, but her hand shook slightly as she reached for the water Elena offered. Elena had started bringing extra food from the hotel kitchen, risking her job even more. She'd also found some secondhand clothes at Goodwill. Nothing fancy, but clean and without holes. Why are you doing all this? Ava asked one night as Elena helped her with music theory flashcards. Because I see myself in you, Elena admitted. And because maybe if I can help you succeed, It makes my own failure mean something. You didn't fail. You survived. Elena smiled sadly. Sometimes they feel like the same thing. As the weeks passed, Ava's playing grew stronger, more confident. She still made mistakes, but there was something in her music that couldn't be taught, a rawness, an honesty that made even simple pieces sound profound. Gregory started showing up during some of their sessions, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. "Charles wanted me to check on you," he'd say, but his eyes would narrow as he listened to Ava play. He was technically perfect, had been trained since childhood by the best teachers money could buy. But when he played, it sounded like exactly what it was, a performance, precise but empty. When Ava played, it sounded like survival. "You know you don't stand a chance," he told her one night. "The judges know Charles. They know me. You're just this year's charity case." Ava didn't respond, just kept playing. But that night, after he left, she composed a new piece, fierce and defiant, with a bass line that sounded like marching feet and a melody that soared above it like hope refusing to die. "What will you call it?" Elena asked. Ava thought for a moment. "Alley Light, because even in the darkest places, something shines through." Elena helped her write it down properly, showing her notation she didn't know. They worked until dawn, until the notes on the page matched the music in Ava's head. The night before the preliminary competition, they practiced until Ava's fingers cramped. She'd chosen her pieces carefully, one classical to show technique, and Alley Light to show her soul. "I found something," Elena said, pulling out an old garment bag. Inside was a simple black dress, elegant in its simplicity. "It was my performance dress from high school. It should fit." Ava touched the fabric carefully, like it might dissolve. "It's beautiful. You're going to be beautiful in it." Elena pulled her into a hug. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you." That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She lay in her alley, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's glow, and played the competition pieces in her mind over and over. She thought about her mother, wondered if she could see her somehow, if she knew her daughter was about to step onto a stage and play for judges who would determine her future. The morning of the competition dawned gray and cold. Elena met Ava at the hotel to help her get ready. They used the staff bathroom, Elena doing Ava's hair and helping her into the dress. When Ava looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. "You look like a pianist," Elena said. "I look like someone else." "No." Elena met her eyes in the mirror. "You look like yourself, just cleaned up. The music is still the same." They took the bus to the competition venue, a gleaming performing arts center that made Ava's stomach clench with nerves. The lobby was full of other young musicians and their parents, all looking polished and confident. Charles was there with Gregory, who wore a designer suit and practiced on a silent keyboard, his fingers moving with mechanical precision. When he saw Ava, his eyes widened slightly. "Well," Charles said, loud enough for others to hear, "let's see if street talent holds up under real pressure." Ava was assigned number 47. She'd go near the end, which meant hours of waiting, listening to other competitors, doubt creeping in with every perfectly executed piece. "Don't listen to them," Elena whispered. "Don't compare. Your music is yours." But it was hard not to compare. These kids had been training since they could walk. They had teachers, coaches, parents who drove them to lessons in expensive cars. They spoke a language of technique and tradition that Ava barely understood. When Gregory performed, the judges smiled and nodded. His Beethoven was flawless, his original composition clever and complex. He walked off stage with a smirk, brushing past Ava. Good luck following that. Finally, they called number 47. Ava walked onto the stage, her legs feeling like water. The piano waited, a concert grand that gleamed under the lights. The audience was a blur of faces, but she could feel Charles's eyes on her, waiting for her to fail. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, panic rose in her throat. What if she forgot everything? What if her fingers wouldn't work? What if? Then she heard it, clear as day, her mother's voice. "Music isn't just notes, baby. It's telling the truth." She began to play. The morning after the preliminary competition, Ava stood outside the Whitmore Grand Hotel, staring at the piece of paper in her hand. She'd made it through. Somehow, despite everything, she'd advanced to the gala round. Elena had screamed when they posted the results, hugging Ava so tight she could barely breathe. But now came the harder part. The gala round wasn't just about playing. It was about performing in front of the city's wealthiest patrons, the same people who'd laughed at her just weeks ago. Inside the ballroom, preparations were already underway. Charles had made the announcement that morning, his voice dripping with false charity as he told his guests about this special addition to tomorrow night's program. "We're opening our doors to raw talent," he'd said at the donor breakfast, Gregory sitting beside him. "A young girl from difficult circumstances will be performing alongside our established artists. It's important to give back, to show that music can come from anywhere." The way he said anywhere made it sound like a disease. Elena found Ava sitting on the hotel's back steps that evening, her hands moving through invisible scales. "You need to eat," Elena said, offering a container of pasta she'd saved from the staff meal. "I'm not hungry. Nerves aren't food, Ava. You need energy for tomorrow." Ava took the container, but just held it. "They're all going to be there. The same people who laughed at me. They're expecting me to fail. Then we prove them wrong." Elena sat beside her. "You've been practicing alley light until my fingers go numb." Ava finally took a bite of pasta. "But what if it's not enough? What if they're right, and I'm just some street kid who doesn't belong?" Elena grabbed her shoulders gently. "You belong wherever your music takes you. Don't let them make you small." The next night arrived too quickly. The ballroom transformed into something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers blazing, tables draped in silk, and hundreds of guests in designer clothes that cost more than most people's yearly salary. The piano had been moved to a proper stage, spotlights waiting to illuminate whoever dared to play. Ava stood in the service hallway, wearing Elena's black dress again, her hands shaking as she listened to the crowd's laughter and conversation. Through a crack in the door, she could see them, the same faces from that night weeks ago, plus dozens more. They held champagne flutes and spoke in voices that had never known hunger. "Ready?" Elena appeared beside her, dressed in her server's uniform, since she was technically working tonight. "No." "Good. If you were ready, I'd be worried." Charles's voice boomed through the microphone, and the room gradually quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this special evening. As you know, the Whitmore Foundation has always supported the arts, particularly young musicians who show exceptional promise." Polite applause rippled through the room. "Tonight, we have something unusual." His pause was deliberate. "A few weeks ago, a young girl approached our venue asking to play piano for food. Laughter started immediately. Not everyone, but enough to make Ava's cheeks burn even from behind the door. In the spirit of charity and inclusion, Charles continued, his tone making it clear what he really thought of both concepts. "We've allowed her to perform tonight. Please welcome Ava." Just Ava, as we don't actually know her last name. More laughter. Someone actually slow-clapped mockingly. Elena squeezed Ava's hand. "Show them who you are." Ava walked onto the stage, and the whispers started immediately. "Is that the same girl? She cleans up well, at least. This should be entertaining." Charles really outdid himself with this joke. She sat at the piano bench, the lights so bright she could barely see the audience. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the keys. Someone coughed deliberately, theatrical. Someone else whispered something about street rats, loud enough to carry. The first note came out weak, uncertain. Her hands felt like they belonged to someone else. The audience's mockery grew louder. Not outright booing, they were too polite for that, but the kind of amused murmuring that was somehow worse. Then she heard it, a child's voice, clear and innocent. "Mommy, why are they being mean?" Ava closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's hands guiding hers, of all those nights practicing on cardboard keyboards, of the music that lived inside her regardless of what anyone thought. She started over. This time, the notes rang clear and true. She began with a classical piece, Mozart's Sonata No. 11, the Turkish March. But she didn't play it the way Gregory would, technically perfect but emotionless. She played it like someone who understood what it meant to march forward when everything tried to hold you back. The laughter began to fade. Not all at once, but gradually like a tide pulling back. By the time she reached the second movement, the room had gone quiet except for her music and the clink of a few glasses. She transitioned without pause into her own composition, Alley Light. The melody started soft, like footsteps in an empty alley, then built into something more. Hope and defiance and grief all woven together. Her left hand created a bass line that sounded like a heartbeat, steady and unbreaking, while her right hand sang a melody that seemed to hold every emotion she'd felt since her mother died. A woman in the front row set down her champagne glass, leaning forward. A man stopped mid-conversation with his wife. Even as servers paused in their routes, trays balanced on their hands, listening. Gregory stood near the bar, his face tight with something that looked like fear. He'd heard her practice, but this was different. This was Ava unleashed, playing not for approval, but for survival. The music built to a crescendo that seemed to shake the chandeliers, then suddenly dropped to almost nothing. A single note repeated like a question. Then the answer came, the melody returning transformed, not happy exactly, but resolved, accepting, moving forward. When the last note faded, the silence was complete. For 5 seconds, maybe 10, nobody moved. Ava kept her hands on the keys, afraid to turn around, afraid to see their faces. Then from somewhere in the back, a single person clapped. Then another. Then a child's voice, the same one from before, shouted, "She's amazing!" The applause that followed was confused, divided. Half the room clapped enthusiastically, some even standing. The other half sat frozen, looking at Charles for guidance on how to react. Charles himself stood near the stage, his face a mask. For just a moment, Ava saw something crack in his expression, not quite admiration, but recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cold smile. "Well," he said, taking the microphone again, "that was certainly ambitious. Thank you, Ava, for that amusing display. Of course, real talent requires more than just enthusiasm." "She's better than your student," someone called out. Ava couldn't see who, but the voice was young, maybe a teenager. "That's enough," Charles said sharply. "Gregory will perform after dinner, and then you can make your comparisons." But the damage was done. As Ava left the stage, she heard the argument starting. "That was extraordinary, Charles. Where did you find her? Don't be ridiculous." It was overwrought, emotional manipulation. Since when is emotion in music a bad thing? "She's untrained. You can hear it in every passage. I heard more in that performance than in the last 10 recitals combined." Elena met her backstage, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. You actually did it. Half of them still hate me, but half don't, and that's half more than before." The rest of the gala devolved into something Charles hadn't anticipated, actual debate. By the time Gregory took the stage for his performance, the room was divided into clear camps. His technically flawless Chopin felt cold after Ava's raw emotion, and though his supporters clapped loudly, others remained tellingly silent. In the corner, a man with sharp eyes and a press badge watched everything unfold. Daniel Morrison from the City Arts Journal had come to cover another boring charity gala. Instead, he found a story. He approached Ava as she stood by the service door, ready to leave. "That was remarkable," he said, showing his press credentials. "I'd like to interview you." Ava backed away. "I don't talk to reporters. Even if it could help you." Daniel's voice was gentle but persistent. "People should know your story. The real story, not whatever narrative Charles Whitmore is spinning." "Leave her alone," Elena said, stepping between them protectively. "I'm trying to help." Daniel handed Elena his card. "The youth competition finals are in 3 weeks, right? By then, Charles will have used his influence to make sure she never gets a fair shot. Unless people are watching. Unless there's pressure." Before Elena could respond, Charles appeared with Gregory at his side. "Consorting with the press?" Charles said to Ava. "How predictable. Trying to turn this into some sob story for sympathy points?" "She doesn't need sympathy," Daniel said. "Her playing speaks for itself." Charles's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Daniel Morrison, City Arts Journal. I'd love to get your thoughts on tonight's performance." Both performances. Gregory's performance was exemplary, as always. As for the girl, She's a curiosity. Nothing more. That's not what half your guests are saying. Charles's jaw tightened. My guests are being polite. Now, if you'll excuse us, the evening is ending. But Daniel had already gotten what he needed. Photos of Ava at the piano, Charles's dismissive quotes, and most importantly, contact information from Elena. The next morning, Ava woke to find Elena standing over her makeshift bed in the alley, holding a tablet. You need to see this. The headline read, Homeless Piano Prodigy Stuns Whitmore Gala, but is she being given a fair chance? The article was balanced but powerful, describing Ava's performance and the crowd's divided reaction. Daniel had interviewed several guests who'd been moved by her playing, and their quotes were damning to Charles's narrative. This changes everything, Elena said. People are paying attention now. But attention came with a price. Within hours, Charles had called Elena into his office. You're terminated, he said without preamble. Effective immediately. For what? Theft of company time, inappropriate use of facilities, and now this media circus. He leaned back in his chair. You have 1 hour to clean out your locker. Elena total. Fine. But I'm still going to help her. With what money? You just lost your only income. Charles's smile was cruel. Face it, Elena. You backed the wrong horse. That girl is going to crash and burn at finals, and you'll have thrown away your career for nothing. We'll see about that. Elena left with her head high, but once outside, reality hit. She had $300 in savings and rent due in a week. How could she help Ava when she couldn't even help herself? Meanwhile, Gregory found Ava at the church where she sometimes slept when the alley got too dangerous. You need to quit, he said without greeting. Ava looked up from the piano keys she'd been drawing on cardboard. Why do you care? I don't. But Charles does. He's going to destroy you. He's already tried. Gregory sat on a nearby pew, and for the first time, Ava saw him as he really was, not the confident prodigy, but a scared young man. You don't understand, he said. I've seen him do this before. There was another kid 3 years ago. Maya Rivera. She was like you, talented, poor, determined. She made it to nationals. Charles made sure she didn't place. Paid off judges, spread rumors about cheating, had her disqualified on a technicality. Why are you telling me this? Gregory was quiet for a moment. Because when I was 7, I was you. My parents were janitors. Charles discovered me, offered to pay for everything. Now I'm trapped. I play what he wants, how he wants, where he pulls my funding and tells everyone I'm ungrateful trash who bit the hand that fed me. So you're warning me to save yourself? I'm warning you because... He struggled with the words. Because when you played Alley Light, I remembered why I used to love music. Before it became a transaction. He stood to leave, then paused. Charles is already working on something. I don't know what, but be careful. That afternoon, Daniel published a follow-up article with more interviews and a video of Ava's performance that someone had secretly recorded. The response was immediate. Comments poured in, most supporting Ava. A GoFundMe page appeared, though no one knew who started it. Charles watched his reputation management team scramble and made a decision. He couldn't attack Ava directly anymore. Too many eyes were watching. But there were other ways. He made a phone call to the competition board. I have concerns about one of the participants. Questions about her eligibility, her background. We should investigate before she embarrasses the foundation. Then he called his lawyer. Find out everything about this girl. Where she's been living, any criminal record, anything we can use. Finally, he summoned Gregory. You're going to win the finals. Whatever it takes. She's better than me, Gregory said quietly. No, she's different. And different doesn't win competitions. Excellence does. Precision does. You have 3 weeks to perfect your pieces. I'm bringing in Madame Petrova from the conservatory. You'll practice 8 hours a day. What about school? I'll handle your teachers. This is more important. As Gregory left, Charles made one more call. Yes, Child Protective Services? I'd like to report a situation. There's a minor living on the streets, being exploited by adults for performance purposes. Back in the alley, unaware of the storm building around her, Ava composed a new piece. She wrote it on napkins Elena had brought her, humming the melody as her fingers moved through the air. This one was different from Alley Light, stronger, more defiant. She called it unbreaking. Elena arrived as the sun set, carrying 2 gas station sandwiches and news. Daniel wants to do a feature. A real profile on you, your music, your story. No, Ava, this could help. I don't want to be a story. I want to be a musician. Elena sat beside her on the cardboard. Sometimes you have to be both. At least until the world changes. The world doesn't change. It does. Slowly, one performance at a time. Elena pulled out her phone, showing Ava the GoFundMe page. Look, $3,000 already. People want to help. Why? Because you reminded them that beauty can come from anywhere. Because you made them feel something real. Ava stared at the number on the screen. $3,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. We could get you real practice time, Elena continued. Real food. Maybe even a cheap motel room, so you're not sleeping outside. What about you? You lost your job because of me. I'll figure it out. I always do. But Ava heard the worry in her voice. That night, after Elena left, Ava made a decision. She walked to the hotel and found Daniel's card in her pocket. I'll do the interview, she told him over the phone. But I have conditions. Name them. Elena needs a job. She sacrificed everything to help me. And I want to tell the whole truth about Charles, about Gregory, about all of it. That could be dangerous. Charles Whitmore has a lot of power in this city. Then people should know how he uses it. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Come to my office tomorrow. Both of you. And Ava, be prepared. Once the story goes wide, there's no going back. That night, Ava played her cardboard piano until her fingers were raw, preparing for a different kind of performance. One where the truth was her only instrument. She didn't know that across town, Charles was preparing too, gathering weapons of paperwork and procedure that could destroy her dreams without ever touching a piano key. The war for her future had begun, and both sides were preparing their strategies. But Ava had something Charles didn't understand. She had already lost everything once. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The finals were in 3 weeks. By then, the whole city would be watching, and the question wouldn't just be who played better. It would be whether talent could triumph over power, whether music could matter more than money. As dawn broke over the city, Ava stood on the roof of the abandoned building next to her alley, looking out at the skyline. Somewhere in one of those gleaming towers, Charles Whitmore was planning her destruction. But here, in the forgotten corners of the city, something else was growing. Hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that music belonged to everyone, not just those who could afford it. She hummed the melody of Unbreaking, and it seemed to catch the wind, carrying across the city like a promise or a threat, depending on who was listening. The morning after agreeing to Daniel's interview, Ava and Elena stood outside St. Bridget's Church, a weathered stone building squeezed between modern apartments. Elena had called in a favor from her cousin Marcus, who worked as the night custodian. Basement's not pretty, Marcus warned, leading them down narrow stairs that smelled of dust and old candle wax. But there's a piano. The upright piano sat against the far wall like a forgotten relative, scratched mahogany, yellowed keys, and pedals that squeaked with rust. Ava ran her fingers along the keys. Several stuck, and the G above middle C was completely dead, but when she played a simple chord, the sound filled the small space with unexpected warmth. It's perfect, she whispered. Marcus handed Elena a key. After 10 at night, no one's here. Just keep the lights low so nobody asks questions. That evening, Elena arrived at the church with devastating news. Charles had me blacklisted. Every restaurant, every hotel, he's made sure I can't get hired anywhere in hospitality. This is my fault, Ava said, stopping mid-scale. No, this is Charles showing his true colors. Elena pulled out her laptop, covered in stickers from her abandoned college days. But I got a job. Night shift at a 24-hour diner across town. Pays terrible, but they don't care about references. When will you sleep? When you're famous and can pay me to be your manager. Elena tried to smile, but exhaustion was already showing in her eyes. Now play. We have work to do. Ava had been playing by ear her whole life, translating the music in her head directly to her fingers. But competition judges wanted to see sheet music, proper notation, technical precision. Elena had checked out every music theory book the library had, and they spread them across the floor like battle plans. The judges will test your sight reading, Elena explained. You need to be able to play something you've never seen before. Ava stared at the mass of black notes on white paper. To her, they looked like a code she couldn't crack. I can hear it when I play it, but reading it. Then we work backwards. Play something, and I'll show you what it looks like written down. They worked until 2 in the morning. Elena would write out simple melodies, and Ava would struggle to decode them. Every small victory felt enormous. The first time she sight-read a full measure correctly, Elena actually cheered. Someone's getting better, a voice said from the stairs. They turned to find an elderly black woman descending carefully, wearing a choir robe over flannel pajamas. I'm Dr. Loretta Sue, she said, extending a weathered hand. I run the choir here, and you're the girl from the newspaper. Ava tensed, ready to run, but Dr. Sue waved her back to the piano. Play something, not for the judges or the competition. Play something for this old church. Ava placed her hands on the keys and began Alley Light. In the church basement, with its stone walls and sacred silence, the piece transformed. It became a prayer, a confession, a testimony all at once. When she finished, Dr. Sue was sitting on the bottom step, eyes closed. Child, you have the gift, but you're playing like someone's chasing you. Someone is. Then you need to learn to stand still. Music isn't about running. It's about being exactly where you are, fully present. She stood, joints creaking. Same time tomorrow night. I'll teach you what they didn't put in those library books. Dr. Sue kept her word. Each night, after Elena left for her diner shift, the old woman would appear. She didn't teach the way books did. Instead, she'd have Ava play scales while telling stories. Music theory isn't math, child. It's language. You already speak it. We're just teaching you to read and write. She brought a metronome older than Ava, its brass pendulum ticking like a heartbeat. Your internal tempo is inconsistent. You speed up when you're emotional, slow down when you're thinking. The judges will mark you down for that. But emotion is what makes it real. Emotion with discipline is what makes it art. Watch. Dr. Sue sat at the piano, her arthritis-gnarled fingers suddenly fluid, playing a Bach invention with such precise feeling that Ava forgot to breathe. Control doesn't mean absence of emotion. It means choosing exactly how much to release and when. Meanwhile, Daniel's article had exploded online. The headline read, "The girl who plays for food, inside the battle between talent and power." He'd interviewed dozens of sources, including 3 former students who'd been crushed by Charles's influence. The GoFundMe hit $10,000. But with visibility came vulnerability. 2 days later, Child Protective Services arrived at the church during Ava's practice. We've received reports of a minor being exploited, the lead officer said, reading from a tablet. Living in unsafe conditions, being used for financial gain. Elena's hands shook as she pulled out the emergency guardianship papers she'd been carrying. I'm her temporary guardian. Here's the documentation. The officer examined the papers. Filed yesterday. Convenient. Legal. Dr. Sue interjected, appearing in her full church authority. I co-signed as a mandated reporter and educator. The child is safe, supervised, and receiving proper instruction. We'll need to inspect her living conditions. Elena's heart sank. Ava had been sleeping in the church storage room on a cot Marcus had found, but it wouldn't pass any official inspection. She stays with me, Dr. Sue lied smoothly. Has her own room in the rectory. You're welcome to inspect it tomorrow during business hours. The officers exchanged glances. We'll be back, and if we find anything irregular. After they left, Dr. Sue turned to Elena. Pack whatever she has. She's staying with me tonight. That rectory better look lived in by morning. That night, Ava slept in an actual bed for the first time in months. Dr. Sue's rectory apartment was small but warm, filled with photos of students spanning decades and a beautiful baby grand piano that took up half the living room. My husband bought it for our 40th anniversary, Dr. Sue explained, running her hand along its surface. He died 2 weeks later. Said he wanted to leave me something that would sing when he couldn't. Ava sat at the piano, and the difference was immediate. Every note rang clear and true. She played Unbreaking, the piece she'd been perfecting, and it sounded like a completely different composition. Fuller, richer, more complete. This is what you could sound like on a real instrument, Dr. Seuss said. Now you understand what you're fighting for. The days blurred together. Elena worked nights and helped during the day, surviving on coffee and determination. Dr. Seuss drilled Ava relentlessly. Scales, arpeggios, sight reading, music history. Daniel published daily updates, building public pressure. The GoFundMe climbed toward 20,000. But Charles wasn't idle. A week before finals, an anonymous blog post appeared. The truth about Ava, plagiarism, lies, and manipulation. It claimed Alley Light was stolen from an obscure composition by a former Whitmore student. The analysis was sophisticated, with waveform comparisons and musical notation. Daniel traced the IP address to a server connected to Charles's PR firm, but the damage was done. Comment sections filled with doubt. Some GoFundMe donors requested refunds. "It's not true," Ava said, staring at the screen in Daniel's office. "I wrote every note." "I know, but proving originality is harder than creating doubt." Daniel pulled up another window. "However, I found something interesting. Maya Rivera, the student Charles destroyed 3 years ago, she's willing to go on record. Video interview. Full documentation of what Charles did to her. Why now? Because she sees herself in you, and because she's been waiting 3 years for revenge." Maya arrived the next day, a young woman with tired eyes and calloused hands from her job at a warehouse. She brought a box of documents, emails, competition scores, even a recording of Charles threatening to destroy her career if she didn't sign an exclusive contract with him. "He owns the judges," Maya warned. "At least 3 of them receive grants from his foundation. They won't dare score you fairly." "Then why compete?" Ava asked. "Because the audience will be there. The media will be there. And sometimes performance transcends scorecards." Maya pulled out an old flash drive. "This is my final performance, the one that should have won. I want you to study it. Not to copy, but to understand what you're up against." They watched Maya's performance on Elena's laptop. It was flawless, emotional, everything a winning performance should be. But the judges had marked her down for technical inconsistencies that didn't exist. "How do I fight that?" "You don't fight it," Dr. Seuss said. "You transcend it. You play so undeniably well that not even bought judges can justify ranking you low without destroying their own credibility." The regional competition venue was a gleaming cube of glass and steel, everything the church basement wasn't. Ava arrived at 6 in the morning for the 8 o'clock call time, wearing the single nice dress Elena had found at Goodwill, navy blue, simple, appropriate. The lobby was already filling with competitors and their entourages. Parents in designer clothes discussed their children's teachers, summer programs in Vienna, master classes with famous pianists. Ava sat alone on a bench, her sheet music in a folder Elena had decorated with music notes drawn in Sharpie. "You must be the famous Ava." A boy about her age sat down beside her. Brown skin, warm eyes, and clothes that suggested comfort, but not wealth. "I'm Matteo. I've been following your story. My mom, too." He gestured to a woman across the lobby who waved warmly. "We're rooting for you." "Why?" "Because I've been doing competitions since I was 5, and they're usually won by whoever's parents can afford the best teachers. You're proof that talent matters more than money. We'll see if the judges agree." Matteo pulled out a small packet of rosin wipes. "For your hands. Helps with grip when you're nervous sweating. My teacher gave me this tip years ago." Before Ava could respond, the lobby atmosphere shifted. Charles entered with Gregory and a severe-looking older woman who could only be Madame Petrova. Gregory looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual confidence replaced with something brittle. Charles's eyes found Ava immediately, and he walked over with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about the plagiarism allegations," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Such a shame when young artists forget that originality is paramount." "My piece is original," Ava said steadily. "Of course you'd say that. Well, good luck. You'll need it." As he walked away, Matteo whispered, "What an ass." Despite everything, Ava laughed, a short burst of surprise that made several heads turn. The first round was technical pieces. Ava drew number 23, middle of the pack. She watched competitor after competitor take the stage, each performance more polished than the last. These weren't just talented kids. They were trained athletes of music, their every movement calculated for maximum effect. When her number was called, she walked onto the stage to find the piano lid positioned too low. Not closed, but low enough to muffle projection. She recognized the sabotage immediately, but said nothing. Instead, she adjusted her playing, brightening her tone and sharpening her articulation to cut through the dampened acoustics. She played Bach's Invention number 13, a piece Dr. Sue had drilled into her muscle memory. Her fingers found each note with precision, the counterpoint between hands creating a conversation that seemed to transcend the technical requirements. When she hit the final chord, the applause was genuine, surprised. One judge, a woman with silver hair and keen eyes, leaned forward to check the piano lid position, frowning. Gregory performed 2 hours later, and he was, as always, technically perfect. But something was different. His playing had always been cold, but now it seemed frozen, each note isolated from the next like he was reading from a script he'd memorized but didn't understand. During the lunch break, Elena found Ava in a practice room, running through alley light for the 100th time. Daniel just texted. Someone leaked the security footage from the piano lid incident. It's going viral. I don't care about viral. I care about the next round. You should care. Public pressure is the only thing keeping this competition honest. Round 2 was sight reading. Competitors were given a piece they'd never seen and 5 minutes to study it before performing. Ava's years of learning by ear actually helped here. She could hear the music in her head as she read it, translating the visual to auditory before her fingers ever touched the keys. The piece they gave her was deliberately difficult, a modern composition with irregular time signatures and extended techniques. But Dr. Sue had prepared her for this, spending hours on contemporary music that pushed beyond traditional boundaries. Ava simplified one ornamental passage, making an artistic choice that showed musical maturity beyond her years. The silver-haired judge actually smiled. That evening, back at the church, Dr. Sue revealed what she'd learned through her network of former students. 3 judges are in Charles's pocket through foundation grants. 2 are neutral. 1, Judge Sarah Henley, the silver-haired woman, is known for her integrity. She's your only hope. 1 out of 6. 1 is all you need if she's vocal enough. And she will be, if you give her reason. Meanwhile, Gregory was crumbling. After his second-round performance, mechanically perfect but emotionally vacant, he found Ava outside the venue. I need to tell you something. He pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. Emails between Charles and the judges. The fake plagiarism documents. All of it. Why are you giving me this? Because I'm done after this competition. Win or lose, I'm walking away from music. Charles killed everything I loved about it. His voice cracked. But you still have it. That thing that makes music matter. Don't let him take it from you. Before Ava could respond, Madame Petrova appeared, grabbing Gregory's arm. Charles is looking for you. Cool me. Now, Gregory went, but not before pressing the flash drive into Ava's hand. That night, Daniel worked through the contents of the drive, his expression growing darker with each document. This is it, he said. This proves everything. But if I publish before the finals, Charles will claim we're trying to manipulate the results. So publish it after, Elena said. By then, damage could be done. Or Dr. Sue said quietly, we make sure the performance is so powerful that the scores don't matter. The semifinal round required 1 classical piece and 1 original composition. Ava chose Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, ambitious for someone her age, a piece that demanded both technical mastery and emotional depth. She walked onto the stage to find the piano properly set this time. Judge Henley had apparently insisted on checking each piano before performances. The hall was fuller now, word having spread about the homeless prodigy competing against the establishment. The ballade began with a question, a gentle melody that hinted at the storm to come. Ava played it like autobiography, the calm before loss, the fury of grief, the desperate hope that somehow something beautiful could emerge from devastation. Her left hand created thunder while her right sang lightning, and when she hit the coda, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Without pause, she placed her handwritten manuscript on the stand, Alley Light, final version. She'd added something Dr. Sue had suggested, a musical quote from Maya Rivera's stolen composition, woven into her own harmony as tribute and reclamation. It was subtle enough that only trained ears would catch it, but Judge Henley's eyes widened in recognition. The piece built from nothing, a single note repeated like footsteps in an empty alley. Then harmony joined, dissonant at first, like the clash of different lives in the same city. But gradually, the dissonance resolved into something unexpected, not pretty, but beautiful in its honesty. When she reached the bridge, she did something unplanned. She began to hum, softly, almost inaudibly, the lullaby her mother used to sing. It wasn't in the score, would probably cost her points, but it felt necessary. The humming wove through the piano line like a ghost, like memory-made sound. The ending came not with a bang, but with a question, a single high note that seemed to hang in the air even after her fingers left the keys, asking whether beauty could survive in a world that tried to crush it. The silence that followed was complete. Then, starting from the back of the hall where the general public sat, applause erupted. Not polite competition applause, but the kind that comes from being moved beyond words. Judge Henley was writing furiously. Two of Charles's judges looked uncomfortable. The audience was on its feet, some crying, and in the balcony, Maya Rivera pressed her hands to her heart. Charles's face had gone pale. This wasn't in his plan, but the competition wasn't over. Gregory still had to perform, and Charles had one more card to play. As Ava left the stage, she saw him whisper something to one of his judges, who nodded and made a note. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, Ava felt like she might actually win. Dawn came too early on the day of finals. Ava woke in Dr. Sue's rectory to find Elena already there, laptop open, face pale. Charles filed an injunction, she said. He's trying to block Daniel's article and claiming defamation. The hearing is in 2 hours, but the finals are at noon. I know. He timed it perfectly. Dr. Sue appeared in her doorway, already dressed in her best suit. Then we go to court first. All of us. The courtroom was small and sterile, fluorescent lights making everyone look sick. Charles sat with 3 lawyers, their briefcases lined up like weapons. Daniel had one lawyer, a young woman named Patricia, who'd taken the case pro bono after reading his articles. Your Honor, Charles's lead attorney began, Mr. Morrison has conducted a smear campaign against my client based on hearsay and stolen documents. Publishing these allegations hours before youth competition final is clearly intended to manipulate results. Patricia stood. Your Honor, the documents in question were provided by a whistleblower concerned about corruption in youth arts. The public has a right to know if competition judges are being influenced by financial relationships. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, reviewed the documents. Mr. Whitmore, these emails appear to show direct communication between you and competition judges regarding scoring. Taken out of context, Charles said smoothly, I discussed many young artists with colleagues. It's called mentorship. This email specifically says make sure the girl doesn't place, the judge read. Hypothetical discussion. From the back of the courtroom, Gregory stood. It's not hypothetical. I sent those documents to Mr. Morrison because I've watched Charles destroy young musicians for years. I have recordings. The courtroom went silent. Charles's face flushed red. Your Honor, Patricia said quickly, we'd like to submit additional evidence. Gregory walked forward, pulling out his phone. The recording was crystal clear, Charles's voice saying, I don't care how well she plays. She's not winning. I've paid too much to these judges to let some street rat embarrass me. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Whitmore, this is serious. However, I cannot rule on criminal corruption charges in a defamation hearing. Mr. Morrison, you're free to publish your article. As for the guardianship challenge, he looked at the second filing. I see no evidence of exploitation. The temporary guardianship stands. Court dismissed. They rushed from the courthouse to the competition venue. Daniel's article went live during the drive, his phone exploding with notifications. By the time they arrived, news vans were pulling up outside. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The hall was packed beyond capacity, people standing in the aisles. Charles was already there, surrounded by board members who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Several were reading phones with worried expressions. Ava, Mateo ran over. Did you see? 3 judges just recused themselves. They're bringing in replacements. The compromised judges were being escorted out, their grants from the Whitmore Foundation suddenly toxic. Judge Henley was speaking with competition officials, and 3 new judges were being sworn in, musicians with no ties to Charles or his money. This changes everything, Elena breathed. Charles appeared beside them, his composure cracking. You think you've won? This competition is about music, not media circuses. Then let the music speak, Dr. Seuss said calmly. Oh, it will. Charles's smile was sharp. Gregory has prepared something special. But Gregory was nowhere to be seen. Madame Petrova was frantically calling his phone, her usual stern expression replaced with panic. 15 minutes before the finals were to begin, Gregory appeared. But instead of his competition suit, he wore jeans and a t-shirt. He walked past Charles without acknowledgement, straight to the competition officials. I'm withdrawing, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. The hall erupted. Charles lunged forward, grabbing Gregory's arm. You can't do this. I own you. Everything you have, I gave you. And now I'm giving it back. Gregory pulled out an envelope. Termination of our contract, citing fraud and coercion. My lawyer says your threats on tape are enough to void any agreement. You're nothing without me. Maybe, but I'd rather be nothing than your puppet. Gregory turned to Ava. Play honestly. That's all any of us should have done. He walked out, leaving Charles standing alone in a circle of whispers and phone cameras. The competition officials huddled, then announced that due to the withdrawal, the program would be restructured. Ava would perform last, after the remaining 4 finalists. The first performer, a girl from Connecticut with perfect blonde ringlets, played Rachmaninoff with technical brilliance, but no soul. The second, a boy from California, had soul, but fumbled the technical passages. Mateo was third, playing a jazz-influenced original that made the audience smile, but confused the classical judges. Then came a surprise. A young Chinese girl, Amy Chun, who hadn't been on anyone's radar. She played with a maturity beyond her 14 years, her Mozart singing with joy, her original composition complex and moving. Real competition. Finally, they called Ava's name. The walk to the stage felt infinite. She could see everyone. Elena crying before she even started, Dr. Seuss sitting straight-backed and proud, Daniel with his recorder ready, Maya Rivera in the balcony with her hands pressed together like prayer, and Charles, alone now, his empire crumbling but his eyes still full of venom. Ava sat at the piano, a Steinway concert grand that made every piano she'd ever touched seem like a toy. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything. Her mother's death, the nights in the alley, the hunger, the humiliation, the hope. She began with Chopin's Ballade No. 1, but tonight it was different. She wasn't playing for judges or audiences or competitions. She was playing for her mother, for every meal she'd skipped so Ava could eat, for every night she'd worked extra shifts to pay for piano lessons, for the dreams she'd had to abandon so Ava could have hers. The piece unfolded like memory, tender, then turbulent, then transcendent. Her hands flew across the keys with precision learned in a church basement, but the music came from somewhere deeper. When she hit the coda, that famous cascade of notes that had broken so many pianists, she played it like falling rain, each drop distinct but part of a greater storm. Without pause, she placed her final manuscript on the stand. Not alley light this time, but unbreaking, the piece she'd written after the humiliation, after the laughter, after learning that the world could be cruel, but music could be stronger. It began with a single note, B-flat, repeated like a heartbeat. Then harmony joined, dissonant at first, clashing like different worlds colliding. But gradually, The dissonance found resolution, not in conventional harmony, but in something newer, harder one. The middle section was pure fury, her left hand creating thunder while her right sang lightning. It was every night she'd been cold, every time she'd been laughed at, every door that had been slammed in her face. But underneath the fury was something else, resilience, the absolute refusal to be broken. Then came something unexpected. In the quiet section before the final movement, Ava began to weave in other melodies. A phrase from Maya's stolen composition, a fragment of Gregory's favorite Bach invention, even a few bars of the lullaby her mother used to sing. It wasn't plagiarism. It was conversation, all these voices joining hers to say that music belonged to everyone who'd ever loved it, lost it, fought for it. The final movement built to what should have been a triumphant climax, but Ava did something else. She let it fragment, dissolve, reform into something quieter but somehow stronger. Not the triumph of winning, but the triumph of surviving, of still being able to create beauty after everything. She held the final chord, letting it decay naturally into silence. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then the audience exploded. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous, primal, the kind that comes from witnessing something that transcends performance and becomes truth. People were on their feet, some crying, some shouting. In the balcony, Maya Rivera sobbed openly. Even some of the judges were applauding, protocol abandoned. Judge Henley was writing furiously, but she was smiling. The new judges were conferring, animated. Only Charles sat still, his face a mask of defeat. The judges deliberated for 40 minutes while the audience waited, nobody willing to leave. When they returned, Judge Henley stood to announce the results. Third place goes to Mateo Williams for his innovative fusion of classical and jazz techniques. Mateo's mother screamed with joy, and he bowed, grinning. Second place goes to Ava. The crowd erupted in boos before she could finish. Just Ava, for exceptional emotional depth and original composition. Second, after everything, second. And first place goes to Amy Chun for technical excellence and musical maturity. Amy deserved it. She'd been flawless. But the audience wasn't having it. The boos grew louder, and someone started chanting, "Ava, Ava." Others joined in, until the hall shook with it. Judge Henley raised her hand for silence. However, we have a special announcement. The judges have unanimously created a special award for artistic courage and original voice. This award, which carries the same scholarship value as first place, goes to Ava. The hall erupted again, this time in celebration. Elena was sobbing, hugging Dr. Sue. Daniel was typing furiously on his phone. Charles stood and walked out, his lawyers trailing behind. But Ava wasn't done. The next morning, the city woke to headlines that went beyond music. Whitmore Foundation under investigation for fraud. Charles's carefully built empire was crumbling. 3 board members had already resigned, and donors were pulling funding. Ava sat in Dr. Sue's living room, reading the acceptance letter from the Manhattan School of Music. Full scholarship, room and board, plus a stipend for living expenses. It felt unreal. You know what this means? Elena said, still in her diner uniform from the night shift she'd worked even after the competition. You're going to Juilliard's rival school. Your mother would have loved the irony. I need to do something first, Ava said. That afternoon, she stood in the cemetery where her mother was buried. It was a simple grave, the cheapest plot available, but Elena and Dr. Sue had helped her buy flowers. White roses, her mother's favorite. I did it, Mom, she whispered. Not the way we planned, but I did it. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Ava could swear she heard her mother's lullaby in the breeze. 2 weeks later, the Whitmore Grand Hotel ballroom was transformed again, but this time for a different kind of gala. The banner read, Alley Light Foundation Benefit Concert. It had been Elena's idea, then Daniel had amplified it, and suddenly everyone wanted to help. The foundation would provide instruments and lessons to kids who couldn't afford them, run by musicians, not donors. The room was still elegant but different. The front rows were filled with children from shelters and foster homes, their eyes wide with wonder. The donors were there too, but in the back, their role reversed. Charles was notably absent. He'd resigned from all his positions and was facing multiple investigations. Gregory had sent a letter of support and a donation. He was teaching piano to kids in Vermont, finding his way back to loving music. Maya Rivera stood at the microphone, now the Foundation's first artistic director. 3 years ago, this room watched as my dreams were destroyed by money and power. Tonight, we reclaim this space for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Ava walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress, not Elena's old one, but one bought with her own money from her first small performance fee. The piano waited, lid fully open, nothing hidden or dampened. She played Alley Life first, but it had evolved. The piece that had started as sadness and defiance had grown into something larger, a symphony of survival that seemed to contain every emotion she'd felt in the past months. Then she played something new, a piece she'd written that morning called Forward. It was simple, almost like a children's song, but there was something profound in its simplicity. It sounded like hope. When she finished, she didn't leave the stage. Instead, she spoke, her voice clear and strong. 6 months ago, I stood outside this building, hungry and desperate, and asked if I could play for food. They laughed at me. She paused, looking at the children in the front row. But music doesn't care if you're hungry. It doesn't care if you're homeless or rich, trained or self-taught. Music only cares if you're honest. She looked at the donors in the back. For every child who's ever played on a cardboard keyboard, who's ever heard music in their head but couldn't afford lessons, who's ever been told they don't belong, this is yours. We're not asking for charity. We're demanding change. She sat back at the piano and began to play her mother's lullaby, but this time, she didn't play alone. Dr. Sue joined her on the ballroom's second piano. Then Mateo appeared with his violin, then Amy Chun with her cello. Other young musicians emerged from the wings. Kids from the shelters who'd been secretly taking lessons, former students Charles had crushed who were reclaiming their voices. The lullaby transformed into a symphony of voices and instruments, professional and amateur, trained and intuitive, all weaving together into something that had never been heard before and would never be heard again in quite the same way. In the audience, Elena wiped tears from her eyes. She'd quit the diner, taken a job as the Foundation's program coordinator. It paid barely anything, but she'd never been happier. Daniel was there too, documenting everything. His series on Ava had won a Polk Award, but more importantly, it had changed how the city thought about talent and access. When the music finally ended, the silence was prayer-like. Then a child in the front row, maybe 7 years old, raised her hand. "Can I try?" she asked. Ava smiled and stepped aside. "It's all yours." The little girl climbed onto the bench, her feet dangling. She played chopsticks, badly, with more enthusiasm and skill. But she played it with joy, and that was everything. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Ava returned to the ballroom alone. The security guard, the same one who'd thrown her out months ago, let her in with a nod of respect. She sat at the piano in the dark hall, lit only by exit signs and street lights through the windows. She played quietly, just for herself, just for the joy of it. No audience, no judges, no competition. Just a girl and a piano and the truth that music could tell. As she played, she thought about the journey, the hunger, the humiliation, the small kindnesses that had saved her, the people who'd believed when believing seemed foolish. She thought about her mother, who'd given everything so Ava could have this moment. The metronome charm Maya had given her ticked softly in her pocket, keeping time with her heart. She'd started with nothing but the music in her head and hands that remembered piano keys, even when there was no piano. Now she had everything: school, future, family chosen if not born. But most importantly, she had her voice. Not just her musical voice, but her actual voice, the one that could speak for everyone who'd been silenced, dismissed, or laughed at. She played until dawn, until the morning light turned the ballroom golden. Then she closed the piano lid gently, like saying goodnight to a friend. Outside, the city was waking up. The streets that had been her bedroom were filling with morning commuters. The alleys that had been her home were being cleaned by workers who didn't know their history. But Ava knew. She carried it all with her. The cold nights, the empty stomach, the desperate hope that music could save her. And it had. Not in the way she'd expected, not easily or cleanly, but it had. She walked to the subway station, her acceptance letter in her pocket, her mother's picture in her wallet, and a new composition forming in her head. It was called Beginning, and it sounded like a girl who'd lost everything, found her voice, and used it to change the world, one note at a time. At the Manhattan School of Music orientation, they asked her to introduce herself. "I'm Ava," she said. Ava Harmon. She'd taken her mother's last name officially, legally, proudly. "I'm a pianist. I learned to play in a church basement, practiced on cardboard keyboards, and performed in an alley. I'm here because people believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other kids don't have to fight as hard as I did just to be heard." The room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding, and Ava realized this was her real first performance. Not as a homeless girl seeking food, not as a competitor seeking victory, but as herself, seeking nothing but the chance to make music and make it matter. 3 years later, Ava stood in Carnegie Hall. Not in the audience, not backstage, but on the stage itself, about to perform with the New York Philharmonic. The piece was Alley Light, now arranged for full orchestra, being recorded for a benefit album that would fund music programs in 50 cities. In the audience sat Elena, now running a national network of music programs for underserved youth. Dr. Sue was there, 91 and still teaching, still believing. Daniel was there with his Pulitzer Prize, still telling stories that mattered. Maya was there, conducting youth orchestras and healing through teaching. Even Gregory was there, having found his way back to music on his own terms. Charles Whitmore was not there. He'd lost everything. His fortune seized in lawsuits, his reputation destroyed, his name synonymous with corruption. The last anyone heard, he was living in a small apartment in New Jersey, giving piano lessons to make rent. There was poetry in that, though Ava tried not to take satisfaction in his fall. She'd learned that revenge was less satisfying than revolution. As the conductor raised his baton, Ava placed her hands on the keys of the concert grand. She thought of that first night, touching the keys for just 5 seconds before being dragged away. Now she had all the time in the world. The first note rang out, that same B-flat that had started everything, but now it was joined by strings, by woodwinds, by brass, by 100 voices, all telling the same story. That talent could bloom anywhere, that music belonged to everyone, that a hungry girl with a gift could change the world if someone just gave her a chance to play. The audience held its breath as the music built, as Alley Light became not just Ava's story, but everyone's story, everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough, didn't belong, couldn't possibly succeed. And when the final note rang out, when the last echo faded into silence, the audience erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hall. But Ava barely heard it. She was thinking of her mother, of that church basement, of the cardboard keyboards, and the cold nights, and the long journey from "Can I play for food?" to this moment. She stood and bowed, and as she did, she whispered words only she could hear. "Thank you, Mom. We did it." The lights dimmed, the curtain fell, but the music continued. In community centers and church basements, in schools and shelters, children were sitting at pianos, real pianos, donated and maintained by the Alley Light Foundation. They were learning that their voices mattered, that their stories deserved to be heard, that music was not a privilege, but a right. And somewhere in the city, a young boy sat in an alley, humming a melody only he could hear, dreaming of pianos he'd never touched. Soon, very soon, someone would find him, would hear him, would give him what Ava had been given, a chance. The cycle continued, the music spread, and the note that changed everything kept ringing, echoing from one heart to another, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolution begins with a single girl asking, "Can I play?" What would you have done if a hungry child asked to play for food, laughed, or listened? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.